Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are your hosts drowning in light novels.
I'm John.
And I'm CC. And this is a show where we review all the anime series from the previous season we did and didn't watch start to finish. Well, like my good old grandpa always used to say,
"Dear child, if you gaze upon the colorful, vast landscape that is modern anime, you don't have to let your eyes wander too far to spy one of them strange, ugly, yet beautiful, and maybe a bit funny in the head species that is known throughout the world as the light novel adaptation. These bizarre beasts often go by weird names, sometimes so long they could fill a whole book on their own. If you come across one of these infamous tricksters, don't get fooled by their good looks, because under that bewitching shell often brews stories that could not have been cooked up by beings with keen or stable minds. And if you are willing and able to resist one's allure, be aware, there's always another one around the next corner, because their numbers are plentiful."
and of course he knew what he was talking about, because as both of us can attest, the anime seasons we cover on the show are usually filled to the brim with these things. So to turn this a bit into a theme on this episode, after I already reviewed a light novel adaptation with Grimoire of Zero on the previous episode, this time I will take a look at the apocalyptic world of SukaSuka. That's not the whole name, trust me. And John will wrap up the show by talking about Saekano, a series that is not only a light novel adaptation, but also about the challenge of creating a visual novel. So you're getting the double novel dip there. So sit back and relax, we'll be right back to turn this page. Willem Kmetsch, there's a name for you, is the last human, kinda, we'll get to that, in the world that the story of SukaSuka is set in. He is, or was, he is a powerful warrior who, at the climax of a big fight, got cursed with a petrification spell, and slept for 500 years under a frozen lake until he was found and brought back to life. In these past centuries, the world's population was driven to almost complete extinction by the powerful monsters called beasts. Humanity was pretty much completely eradicated, and the remaining races of animal people and fairy folk fled to islands floating in the sky to find safe harbor from the beasts which now roam the Earth's surface. At the beginning of the show, Willem runs into a human-looking girl introducing herself as Kutori, who got lost looking for a specific place in a big city. Willem helps her find it, and soon after, both part ways, never to see each other again. Of course, that's not what happens, because soon after that encounter, Willem takes on a job as a caretaker for a warehouse that is supposed to store some powerful weapons against the beasts. And wouldn't you know it, that warehouse turns out to be an orphanage, and the weapons turn out to be girls. Leprechauns, to be exact, which Kutori is, of course, being one of them. They are powerful fairies who can wield the so-called duck weapons that are the only thing that can push back the beasts, which are attacking the Sky Islands on a regular basis. And now Willem has his hands full, naturally, coming to terms with his past and the family he has lost, while trying to protect his new one and facing the blossoming feelings between him and Kutori. So SukaSuka, and I'm so sorry for butchering this, Shumatsu nani shitemasu ka? Isogashii desu ka? Sukutte moratte ii desu ka? Which is translated to WorldEnd, which again is short for "What do you do at the end of the world? Are you busy? Will you save us?"
Some of these light novel names just get a little out of control.
It's like I previously mentioned, adapted from a light novel, written. It's written by Akira Karino. There apparently is a manga adaptation as well, and like John just said, yeah, the title is incredibly long. I mean, it's not the only light novel that does that, but
there are other worse or probably equally bad offenders. But I feel like we've reached a point where if oh, there's this show coming up. I haven't heard of it before. You can kind of look at the name and be like, it's a light novel.
There it is.
Like, there's one, I think, either next season or the season after called, like, Death March to the Parallel World Rhapsody. And the first time I read that name, I was like, you're a light novel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. There's apparently a manga adaptation too, and apparently the second light novel series, there are two, is still running. So yeah. The anime was produced by Satellite, who this season are dishing out great action with Symphogear. We've already talked about that a bit in our sneak peek. But they are also well known for working on Macross stuff like Macross Frontier and Delta. We already reviewed Macross Delta on episode 18 of this show. And go listen to that for our thoughts on that. Those were pretty positive. The other show they're pretty famous for is Lock Horizon, which I haven't watched, but John has, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Well, they did the first season, then it was handed off to Dean, and it was woof.
They did the good season, animation-wise.
The good-looking season, because the story kind of wrapped up on a really weird note, and it was like, this is really where you're going to end it, guys? Oh, okay.
Mm. In terms of animation quality, they can be a bit of a mixed bag, in my opinion. The animation can be great, but also dip a lot from scene to scene or episode to episode and, get a bit mediocre at times. Some shows I've seen from them had a direction that compensated for that a lot, especially in Symphogear and Macross Delta. Fairy Tail was kind of half and half, at least the 20 episodes or so I've seen from it. Some looked pretty decent, some looked really jank, so yeah. I think the only show that was full-on garbage, at least from what I remember, was Guin Saga. That looked shitty in terms of animation, and the direction was super weird. So that fell flat on all levels. So how was Lock Horizon in that regard?
I mean, like I said, in the first season, the animation and the character designs were fine. It's just when you got to the second one, and it looked and felt terrible, and then every time they would flash back to the first season and you would see the vast difference in style, it was like, oh,
yeah.
Why couldn't we have what we had before? Why can't we continue to have nice things?
But it was one of Satellite's definitely really good looking shows.
Yeah.
Okay. When it comes to SukaSuka, I'd say the same rules apply. There are some cool fights, and there's nice scenery in many episodes, but there's also some janky motion and off-model characters. So again, a bit of a mixed bag in the animation department. But I thought the show is interesting to look at because, just like in Grimoire of Zero, there's a bunch of animal people in this, because humans are pretty much extinct. But they have not been super furrified. They look still really like animals, especially in the face department. And it just means, there's a lot of variety in terms of character models, which I appreciated. Keeps it pretty diverse and interesting. So I'm not a big fan of the eyes on the human-looking characters in this show because the pupils are weirdly small, which makes them look a bit dead and expressionless sometimes. I don't know why they did that, but I don't know. I just felt it looked weird. I don't know if you've seen any artwork from the show.
I've just seen key art and the original stuff from the lens. So
probably looks a bit better on that. But yeah, when it's in motion and in the not so good looking scene, it's just feels really weird because it's they have really big eyes, but these super small pupils, and I don't know. Looks a bit weird. But aside from that, just in terms of artwork, it's a good looking show in my opinion. I also I love that tweet. I forgot who posted it, but there's the scene where you see a dog lady storming into a room and she's like, "Uncle, we have to talk." And that uncle she's referring to is a giant dragon dude. And the tweet just says, "Anime is wild." And I have to agree.
I think I remember seeing that.
Yeah, it's great. It totally fits. The director is Junichi Wada, who, aside from this, directed the Haruhi series, The Disappearance of Nagato Yuki-chan, which I haven't seen. I've only seen the first Haruhi show. I don't can't speak of the quality of the of that spin-off.
Yeah, I watched that series beginning to end, and it was interesting in the story department, the way they kind of like it had serious implications that was part of like what was it called in the original series? Eternal 8, Endless 8.
Yeah.
But in the animation department, it was a little rough.
Okay.
Which is unfortunate because, again, this brings us back to the sliding scale of quality that Satellite sometimes operates on.
Well, the previous Ari shows were KyoAni shows, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So they handed that over for this. Okay. Wada has also worked as a storyboard artist on Log Horizon and as an episode director on the Eureka 7 sequel, which I haven't finished. I started that, and I don't know why I didn't pull through on that, because I really like Eureka 7.
Yeah, I never finished watching the original, so.
Oh, that's a shame. It's a really good show. One of Bones' best, in my opinion. But anyway.
Which I have heard, yes.
Yeah. And he was also an episode director on Hero Man, among other things. A show I also really enjoyed. Could have used a few more seasons, in my opinion, but didn't get that. Shame. But yeah, solid job for this one. Like I said, some action scenes are good. The first episode is especially nice in terms of its scene composition, when Kotori and Willem search the city. But aside from that, I'd say the only real standout moment would be the final confrontation in that show. The rest is pretty standard. But yeah, speaking about which is not a bad thing. It's a competent direction, but still. Speaking of the first episode, the music in the scene I mentioned earlier was fantastic. It just drips with atmosphere and was one of the things that pulled me right into the show. Worked really well in that scene, and I think the music in general is really good in the show. And when I looked up who is responsible for it, I was surprised because it's Tatsuya Kato, who also did the score for Food Wars, Body Complex, Free, and you have seen also a lot of shows he did the music for, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, he has a lot to his name, but I mean, his work is fresh in my mind because I just finished watching the first season of Food Wars a couple of nights ago, so. Yeah,
and also he worked on Prisma Ilia, on Love, Life, Sunshine, and one of the other recent shows he worked on is Masamune-kun's Revenge. I think those are all shows you watched.
Yeah, the soundtrack in Masamune, putting aside, the quality of some of the other stuff about the show, the soundtrack was really good.
Yeah, he does great work. And that's probably one of the best things about SukaSuka is the music, not only in that first episode, but in general. Now, story-wise, sadly, just like with Satellite's animation, SukaSuka is also a bit of a mixed bag. I like that the story committed to its main relationship, because, these kind of shows tend to get harem-y very fast. There's a bunch of girls in the orphanage, and Willem is like, stunning, jumping in there. He's like this powerful warrior and, kind of a self-insert character. And, usually these shows go like, okay, he's, taking care of all the girls, and all the girls, for one reason or another, are throwing themselves at his feet, and you got this Sundara trophy girl, and you got the nice girl, and the girl a more mature girl he knew from his past, which is a troll in this case, who looks like a normal lady, but constantly says she wants to eat him. And, you would imagine that in a show like that, you constantly would be barraged with harem tropes and something like that. That doesn't really happen in SukaSuka, and I really appreciated that. I mean, it's not completely free of that. There is some fan service here and there, and Willem, has some ladies in his vicinity that might or might not be interested in him. Like I said, the troll lady, I forgot her name, says she has some history with them and is kind of interested in him, but she doesn't really pursue it, and doesn't really make any advances towards him or something like that. And the other girls neither. It's just like a few jokes here and there, maybe. But he treats most of them, kind of as a dad, which makes sense because he had a daughter in his past life, and a lot of the girls in the orphanage are still children, and they're kind of being prepared to fight the beasts and everything, and he he develops kind of fatherly feelings for all of them and wants to protect them and stuff like that. But it stays that way. And unlike like a show, like let's say like Bullet, the series doesn't really throw in unnecessary lolicon bait scenes. I was really grateful for that, because that can quickly make a series icky and gross and ruin otherwise cute or emotional scenes, which the show has with with the younger characters in the show and Willem. And, his legit concern because they remind him of his daughter and stuff like that. So, yeah. Like I said, mostly SukaSuka is concentrating on the developing relationship between Willem and Kutori and the stuff that surrounds the bigger conflict in the show against the beasts and, the leprechauns fighting the beasts and what that means and, how they react to it, how Willem reacts to that, and stuff like that. So that's basically what happens in the show. And then we get some mysteries sprinkled in between. I'll get to that later. About, the origin of the beast and stuff like that. And you get a lot of lore and, how is this world and how did this world come to be and stuff like that. But yeah, main relationship of the show is Willem and Kotori, and it pretty much stays that and gets developed, at least to a point. I mean, he treats her more as a kid in the beginning too, but that changes later on because she is pretty insistent on, wanting to get closer to him. And she's arguably the most mature and responsible of the leprechaun bunch. So yeah, I kind of liked how their relationship was developed on a basic level. The problem is how that gets resolved, and also how often that is not the focus of the show. If you see the first few minutes of the first episode, which kind of teases the ending of the show, and when you hear about the special nature of the leprechauns early on and how their life on Earth usually plays out and everything, you can pretty much guess pretty safely what kind of ending this story is headed towards. And without giving too much away, it is exactly headed where you think it is, and it's not a happy place.
Oh.
Now, I don't mind sad endings if there is enough substantial emotional stuff to latch onto, and it's not just a tragedy for tragedy's sake and shock value. And I feel like SukaSuka was, dabbling more in the latter part than the former. It feels more like it gets sad to be sad, and I didn't have that much an emotional connection to the characters to make me feel that all this, sad thing was warranted. Or let's say I didn't really get an emotional response from that. The thing is, the show doesn't spend nearly enough time to build a satisfying arc for either Willem or Kutori. Yes, they develop their relationship, but I don't know, the pacing for that is a bit weird. You have these weird start and stop gaps for that. It's not it doesn't feel like a continuous development. It's okay, now Kotori goes off to fight, and then she comes back, and there are a few more scenes with Willem, and then he goes off and does something else, and then she comes back, and then they grow a bit closer together again. It feels like a bit of a, I don't know, stop motion thing. It doesn't feel like a fluid continuous development. We learn a few things here and there about Willem's past, but instead of getting more, unnecessarily lore of the world and some, hijinks with the orphanage kids that didn't really need to be in there, or random battles that really didn't need to be in there, it would have been nice to see more about where he was coming from, more about his past life, to truly appreciate how meeting Kutori and everyone else changes him. There's a character with a connection to Willem's past, who's also human, but not really alive. Don't want to give too much away there, but he barely has any screen time, and it would have been cool for him and Willem to talk about some more old adventures, to get a better grasp on what kind of person Willem was before, and who he is now, and who he is becoming. And yeah, that maybe would have made his character more interesting, and more well developed. And we don't really get that. We get some few snippets here and there, and those are interesting. But it also leaves me like, no, don't cut away now. I want to know more. I want to see more about his past life. And they don't really do that. Also, the show spends a bit too much time on building up its story twists, which really aren't twists to begin with, because the first big one, being the origin of the beasts, is so obvious and has been done to death that they could have given that away right at the beginning of the show and not wasted any more time on that, in my opinion. It's really, really, really obvious. And the second one being about the changes of Kutori's mind and body and the weird memory fragments that plague her. The resolution for that comes kind of out of nowhere and also doesn't really have any emotional resonance with the rest of the show's cast or story. So that was, I don't know, that just felt kind of weird. Or I missed something, I don't know. But it was like, okay, yeah, that happened. I guess sometime. And what does that mean now? Is that really relevant? Doesn't really further develop her character or anything. So yeah, that was, I don't know, that was a weird thing that was part of the story and maybe shouldn't have been. Yeah, it felt like wasted time. Also, there are way too many side characters in this show and in this cast that don't contribute anything really that substantial or interesting or worthwhile to the story and could have been cut completely. It's like that really needed to be thinned out, in my opinion. I mean, they're not annoying or anything or bad characters or bad character designs or anything, but it's like, okay, why are you in this story? What are you doing besides fighting or something like that? Or maybe like talking to the characters. You are not interesting, or yeah, I don't know. If they had spent more episodes on Willem and Kutori growing together, going on adventures, and maybe fighting together, maybe sprinkle in some more memories from Willem's past that directly relate to the things he is going through in his present, then maybe the emotional core of the show would have been strong enough to make me care more about the ending than I did. But as it turned out, I just shrugged, laughed at the very final scene because that's kind of a lot of bullshit, and then moved on. And that's kind of a shame because the show had potential, but in my opinion didn't even come close to fully realizing it.
So, like we were saying, we go from one light novel to another, and you know how you were just saying you were glad there weren't a lot of harem elements, and you're sure they were only kind of lightly touched on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're going to swing a little bit in the other direction.
Oh boy.
Not too heavily, but Saekano, the Japanese name, Saenai Heroine no Sodate Kata, or if you're not a weeb, How to Raise a Boring Girlfriend, you know, has some of those harem-y aspects in there. So, the story kind of circles around Tomoya Aki. He's a high school teenager. He's a nerd with a dream, and his dream to be able to create the greatest visual novel of all time.
Wow, high stakes.
Well, you know, we all have our aspirations. Tomoya, he's a dork. He doesn't have much interest in girls, or the 3D kind, anyway. So one day,
he wants to make a romantic visual novel, dating visual novel, or
he wants to create his waifu.
Well.
So one day he runs across this girl, Megumi, and she's like gorgeous and like the spitting image of what he wants to do. And he's like, I want to model a character after you. And it's kind of, I don't know if that seems a little bit creepy, but you know, they sort of have a lack of interest in one another. So they kind of play off each other in a funny way like that. Because Megumi, every time Tomoya has something to say, she just has a cold, biting criticism that's just, you know, very straight to the point, very, you know, matter of fact.
Wait, does he want to model the game only after her looks, or does he want to put her like complete character into the game?
I guess it'd be kind of a little of both.
Okay.
But, I mean, Tomoya he's not very good at the things he wants to do. Like, he's not a great writer. He's not a really good artist. He can, do a little programming, but, he ends up bringing in some people that he knows to help him work on it. Like his childhood friend, Eriri, who is like a very well-known doujin artist to help, do the illustrations. And then one of his upperclassmen, this girl, Utaha, to help him write the game scenario, who has written her own light novels and whatnot. So, we get a little bit of the inception on that, where it's a light novel talking about, another kind of medium, but the light novel is also referenced in it's weird. But it's interesting the way it works out.
Why does Megumi even agree to this? Is there any reason given for that? Is he like blackmailing her or something?
I guess it just sort of catches her interest. Like, that's basically the long and short of it. At first, she's kind of like, yeah, whatever. But then she sort of slowly gets into it.
Okay.
Yeah, she's not an otaku nerdy weeb the way Tomoya is, but everyone sort of gets into it in their own way. I'm sure you probably realize by now that, we have, I forgot one character, there's also, I believe, Tomoya's cousin Michiru, who helps write the music. That gets a little weird, as you might imagine. Mm-hmm. But, we have 3 other interests, so the harem is alive and well. Basically, the conceit of the story is that, he wants to create this game and he needs the help of these others. But, everyone else has their own things going on in their life. Like, Eriri and Utaha are very talented and very well known. That is to say, they operate under like pseudonyms in their works and online and whatnot. So, but having these names attached to Tomoya's game will be able to make it, more appealing to others and whatnot. So they formed this studio, I guess more like team. They call themselves Blessing Software. And the game that they are working to create is called Cherry Blessing. And, when it becomes apparent that Eriri and Utaha want a little more than a working relationship, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, will this mini harem cause trouble for the project?
I assume it will, or otherwise the series would be devoid of comedy or something.
Well, the character archetypes are laid out pretty plain from the get-go. Like, Megumi is, the very deadpan, sort of character, just sort of along for the ride at first. Eriri is the very tsundere, like power tsundere. And Utaha is like, there are several instances where she's taking, Tomoya in one arm and just being like, whispering these sweet nothings in his ear, constantly calling him Mr. Ethical because, he doesn't want to get involved with her in that way. The cast of characters, I feel like they're diverse enough from one another that, you get a good feel for who they are and what they want both out of this smaller project and out of their chosen vocations. And they're likable. They're interesting. They're not like flat, which is a pretty good pun considering flat is in the title of the second season.
Okay, why?
I'm not sure. I looked that up and I was like, I don't get why it's called flat, but sure, all right. It's one of those things that I sort of let slide after a bit.
Music pun or something? I don't know.
I mean, yes, it is, I guess it would be a music pun because the symbol for like flat, as in you'd see on like sheet music, is part of the title as opposed to just the word flat. So this show was animated by A1. And we all know A1 has, their moments of goodness and badness for what they're worth.
There's another mixed bag.
Yeah, I mean, this series didn't look bad, but it was also not like a show that was animation intensive or really needed to be like other shows that they've worked on.
Other shows they're working on right now.
Well, I mean, yeah,
Fate
like
Apocrypha.
Like Fate Apocrypha, we're about 9 episodes into that, and the animation quality on some of those fights is wow,
ridiculous.
It
looks so good. I mean, it's
really, really good.
It's a teaser for when we review it in like 2 seasons or something. I mean, the show is running for 2 seasons, but goddamn those fight scenes. I'm sorry, short tangent, but goddamn A1, they truly delivered on that. But I assume that show had a bigger budget also than Saekano and needed one too. So
yeah, I mean, like as much as I hate giving Sword Art credit, it's another one of A1 shows, and it also has really good animation and direction. So every so often, I have to give Sword Art Online a little bit of credit, but not for its writing. Saekano,
only crazy people would do that.
Kawahara, had on his side Hajime Yatate with the creation of his other series, Excel World. And, Yatate has been in the business a lot bit longer than Kawahara, so he kind of had someone to rein him in and make Excel World, better than Sword Art. Saekano was originally written by Fumiaki Maruto, who also did a lot of the script writing on the show as well, which is nice to see, so that there's consistency between the two works. He also did script on other shows like Classroom Crisis, which is a show that I've gone on about at length that I love to death, as well as another show called White Album 2, which was, I mean, it was a different sort of school romance thing. I don't know. It wasn't bad, but it certainly wasn't no Classroom Crisis. The original character designs were done by Kurehito Misaki. He's done like other illustration stuff, just like some of those end cards that you see on shows with guest artists, that sort of thing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The show was directed by Kanta Kame, who directed, you're not going to like me for bringing this name back up, but Dimension W.
Oh, boy.
Also, Nanana's Buried Treasure and Tales of Vesperia, The First Strike. So, I mean, there's one little turd in there, but the other stuff he worked on was pretty good. So, and music by Hajime Hayakoku, who worked on stuff like New Game and K-On!, which, I have feelings about K-On!, but...
But you didn't have any problems with the music in K-On!, right? I mean...
There's one song I like. The rest of it you can kind of have.
All right.
But the music...
I haven't watched the show. I mean, I have no opinion on K-On! Whatsoever. I haven't heard any of the songs that, at least not consciously, that that are from that show. So I was just asking.
Yeah, well, K-On!, it was a show about music. So if your show about music doesn't have good music, you got a problem.
Since you seem to be not too happy with the music in that show, how did he do on this show?
Well, the music in Saekano was very, I feel thematically appropriate when it needed to be, I feel like now, about 3 months after having watched it, I probably wouldn't be able to pick any of the songs out off the top of my head, but because there are other memorable soundtracks out there. Like we were just talking about Tatsuya Kato, and he's done so much good stuff that's really just very memorable. So I don't know. Maybe if I had watched it more recently, I'd be able to say that I like the music a bit better. But looking back on it, it was kind of, it served its purpose, let's say.
There are worse things than that. As long as it didn't,
so long as there wasn't a complete tonal dissonance.
Yeah, which is like, I like this. For example, I like the music in Berserk, but one of the only things I liked about that show. But you know, it was much better in the second season. The first one, like the the music choice was a lot more interruptive and didn't always fit the scene that was played in. It was better in the second season, so that can happen. It can like be the music can like be not totally not fitting the scene and the context that it's played in. So even if there are no standout songs, it's always good when the music at least is not, you know, raising your eyebrow in a negative way because it's, you know, pops up in a scene where it doesn't belong. So, you know.
Yeah.
You can say worse things about an anime soundtrack than being unintrusive. So
exactly, because, you know, sometimes I don't remember the last time I watched a show and it had a song that was really like, wait a sec, huh? But, you know, sometimes it's out there and it sort of hits you like a Mack truck and you're like, wait, hold on. But yeah, like I said, likable cast of characters. The character designs are all pretty unique. Their motivations are interesting. Like, it gets to a point without giving too much away where some of the characters have to choose between working on this smaller project or, you know, going after the bigger fish that is coming their way. And, you know, it makes the interactions a little more interesting because it's like, you know, whether, you know, they stay and help on it or, you know, they go after this bigger, better thing that, you know, make their career and whatnot. It's interesting. So.
And I assume at least one of those characters is kind of linking that to her relationship to, you know, the main guy. I'm like, okay, I'm going to stay on if we get closer or something, or is that not happening?
Yes, in a word.
Okay. I mean, we don't have to give away who it is or something.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like what I've said might already be too much, but it's at least an interesting hook later on in the story.
Okay, that's cool. Like, is the development of the visual novel, is that like a constant threat, or is that like kind of thrown aside after a while to make space for the, I don't know, the love triangles or whatever? And is that even like, I don't know, developed continuously? Is like the first visual novel finished, or the first chapter finished at the end of the first season or something?
Well, the big goal is to get the game all done and set so they can sell it at Comic-Con. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's a lot of speed bumps along the way, as you might imagine, because, you know, I haven't done it myself, and I don't know if you have either, but, you know, making a video game is not easy.
No, I haven't, but I can imagine.
So they come across, you know, not only issues with actually coding the game, but, you know, trying to revise the story, get all the art assets in there, you know, and make sure that the game has a natural flow to it, that sort of thing. So it is a constant focal point for the story, which is, you know, if it wasn't, it would probably be a little, strange. But no, it is constantly there, and it is something that is very much key and central. So
that's cool. That's also interesting that they like get into the technical details and, you know, really focus on the difficulties of, you know, making such a project actually happen. And I wonder how true to, you know, actual visual novel development that is. Like I said, I don't have any experience myself, but I wonder if that's like a Shirobako thing where this is like, I don't know, maybe a bit of a simplified and heightened version of what's happening in the anime industry, but close enough that you can, you know, get a feeling for what it's really like to work there and to work on this specific project.
Well, I mean, this is, you know, also kind of an interesting story of when you have, like, you know, a doujin group of, like, you know, 5 people, like in this story, working on a project, as opposed to something else like New Game, which, you know, New Game is not your typical sort of story about this because, you know, it's very much a sunshine and roses kind of story. I don't know, a lot of people like New Game, and I've spoke about this before, but, you know, you have the first episode where you're introducing the new girl, Aoba, And she's like, "Oh, I'm fresh out of school. I can't wait to, join this dev studio and help make this game." And she goes in there not knowing the project they're working on, which is like, she goes in there, not entirely sure of how to do her job, which again, it's like,
And everything works out fine.
Yeah. And I mean, I know people like New Game, and I don't know if I should try and give it another fair shake, but I kind of bowed out after, I don't know, maybe 2-3 episodes, and I was like, yeah, no, this doesn't feel. I'm suspending my disbelief way more than I feel like I need to. Whereas with Saekano, I feel like it is more believable because, like I said, it's a smaller team trying to take on this ambitious project, and it's a lot more interesting, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, roadblocks and difficulties and stuff like that are interesting, and to see the people get around them, around those, and grow with that, like, develop new traits and everything, and overcome those difficulties to become, stronger characters and everything, and that, that those difficulties don't always have to be like supervillains who, have to learn new karate moves to punch them into orbit or something, which a lot of shonen shows do. Those can, just learning how to program, learning how to write a proper script and tell a proper story. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
And if Saekano does that relatively well, I'd say that's a really good thing.
I think my only major complaints about the show are that, Tomoya is a giant nerd, and he does come across as a little too indecisive at times, which I guess is fitting with his character. But there's times where it's like, come on, man, you gotta shit or get off the pot, Which
How
is
nice.
which is a turn of phrase that I borrow from a good old movie called Clerks. Thanks, Kevin Smith.
All right.
And I mean, I guess the other aspect is that, of course, it's a harem show, but sometimes I feel like it can be a little detracting because, not every
always is.
Not every story needs to have, three. It needs to have the main character have 3 to 4 women hanging off either arm, leg, or choose your appendage or body part in here.
Yeah, my problem is that you can do that. But after a few episodes, please put that like on the sidelines and maybe make a few jokes here and there. But please don't waste too much time on relationships that we all know will not happen, will not be developed. It's just every time that happens in a show like that, I feel like, okay, this is a waste of time. We all know he's not gonna end up with these characters, and if for some reason he does, I'm super surprised. I'm like, hey, this is I didn't see that coming. But if he ends up with anyone, which also is not a given in that show, usually those love triangles, at least from the shows I've seen, don't necessarily get resolved. There is the quote unquote main girl where you're like, okay, if he's gonna end up with anyone, he's gonna end up with that girl. But that doesn't really need to happen by the end of the show. It's like maybe they are a bit closer than they were in the beginning, but that doesn't mean by the end of the show they're in a relationship or something. Or, God forsake, have kissed or something like that. That rarely happens in anime anyway. But
they have to hold hands.
Yeah, they have to hug. Oh my God, it's so lewd. Anyway.
Also, there is, I don't know if it's an unwritten rule, but it's a rule nonetheless. The childhood friend character can never win. It's not allowed. It's not allowed.
Yeah, I wonder. How did that... Wait, what was that? How did Love Hina end? It's one of the most famous examples. Didn't he end up with his childhood friend?
Oh, jeez, you're asking that, and it's been forever since I've watched Love Hina. But I feel like you might be right. What was her name? Naru? I think it was.
I think so, yeah. She was a horrible character. That's all I remember about her.
The only thing I'll remember Naru for off the top of my head was she was the first girl I heard who was voiced by one of my favorite Japanese voice actresses, Yui Horie, so there we go.
Well, then she got something going for her. But yeah, anyway, I'm just again, tangent, sorry, but that's usually my problem with harem anime. It's not that it's like, not the concept itself that is like, you know, the self-insert guy who has a lot of ladies thrown at him. It's like, oh, all right, you know, you can play that for laughs, you can make that fun. But to me, that's funny for like a few episodes, and if you know, keep going back to that and don't do anything with the main story or the main pairing or the, you know, whatever your hook is, which in this case is developing the visual novel, if that doesn't get progressed or developed, you instead get hung up on the fucking, you know, on the characters just, you know, no, I'm gonna be with him. No, I'm gonna be with him. No, none of you are. Fuck you. This is not the kind of show that is. So, yeah. How bad does Saekano get in that regard, and how much time does it quote unquote waste on these things, or does this at some point become like more of a joke thing, and you know, the main guy is like, okay, he is probably gonna end up with Megumi or something, or they develop a relationship. I know this is spoiler territory, of course. You don't have to say how far that gets developed, but I'd at least like to know, and maybe some of the listeners do too, you know, in what direction this show is headed in. Like, does it stagnate in that kind of regard, or does something happen?
I sort of feel like after a certain point, they just sort of played it for... They played like the romance part for laughs, but you know, the friendships and the relationships that they all kind of develop with each other do feel more legit. I mean, like I said earlier, Utaha continuously calls Tomoya Mr. Ethical because, you know, he won't hit on her the way she wants him to.
Yeah, but she doesn't really go beyond that, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Well, but I wonder, so the series did have 2 seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it gonna have like a third one? Is the light novel still running? Is you know, the story kind of resolved?
I mean, as far as I could tell in the show, it seemed resolved, but the author Maruto announced that the 13th volume, which isn't out yet, is going to be the finale. So, I mean, maybe there's room for another series where, you know, they try and work on another VN. I'm not sure. I don't know the story beyond what's told in the show, to be perfectly honest.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But there, you know, there's room for another season.
I feel like
by the end of the second season, would you say that can happen?
I mean, I look at some other shows and I'm like, yeah, that wrapped up, you know, nicely, and then all of a sudden there's another series. So I sort of feel like it's tough to say anymore. Okay. But you know, I could see them trying to make a third one.
But would you contend if there wasn't a third one? Would you say, yeah, that's like a good point to end on?
I mean, I feel like they ended on a good point with the second season, but you know, we'll have to see what happens. Yeah, so I mean, if you want a story that's, you know, about something that feels a little more interesting in regard to, you know, a smaller group of friends trying to create something rather than, you know, the alternative new game. I feel like it is substantial on that level, on the goal that the characters are trying to achieve, as well as their interactions. So it's worth watching.
And that is a wrap on the 36th episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in our show is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jake Kaufman. Please go to virt.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. You can listen to our show on most of the popular podcast services, but it's always worth visiting animebrainfreeze.com for some interesting articles linked in our episode release posts. Follow us on Twitter @AnyBrainFreeze for regular updates and tweets from the world of anime. Leave us comments and questions on Facebook and our YouTube channel, or send an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next show. Macht's gut.
Take care, everybody.
Next time on Anime Brain Freeze.
A skyfaring journey filled with discovery and adventure.
And the origin of one of anime's oldest icons.